Can an ecosystem survive without a cornerstone species it had for thousands of years? Once it's gone, is it possible to bring it back? Believe it or not, the federal government did exactly that in the late 1900s. The Yellowstone wolf reintroduction of 1995 was one of the most revolutionary yet controversial wildlife conservation efforts in history. An obvious success to the Yellowstone ecosystem, the wolves' return cost the trust of many ranchers and locals. The reintroduction would have been more successful if it was controlled by state governments rather than the federal government. Future environmental efforts need to reform by prioritizing local government control. The year is 1926. Two young wolf pups lie dead by Soda Butte Creek, trapped by park rangers. They are the last of their kind in Yellowstone National Park. The death of these pups is celebrated as a great achievement. They were perceived as a threat to ranching, a cornerstone of Wyoming culture and economics. In the 1920s, humans didn't understand the detrimental impacts the wolf extinction would cause on the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. Without wolves, prey populations grew unchecked, overeating vegetation needed by other species. The Yellowstone ecosystem became strained, collapsing from the thriving environment it once was. By the 1970s, people became increasingly aware of the effects that the wolf extinction caused on the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, and the American public became interested in bringing the wolves back. In 1973, the Endangered Species Act was passed, legally mandating Western states to reinstate wolves in some capacity. Despite this, the idea was debated for decades. People were fearful of wolves due to ranching and safety concerns. Additionally, the protection of the Endangered Species Act caused concern about limiting local control on a theoretical wolf population. In 1994, a compromise was reached. The wolves would be reinstated as an experimental population, which could be regulated by states. John Turner, former member of the Wyoming House of Representatives who comes from generations of local ranchers, gives his opinion.
But I told the Western senators and congressmen, look, the idea is not going to go away. An Endangered Species Act will protect wolves if they ever come in extreme ways. I want to try a new way to bring wolves back, where the states will be partners in their management. And we put the plan together using a very unique part of the Endangered Species Act, which allows you to designate experimental populations. Experimental populations you can manage. You can go in and manipulate because they're experimental. If they come under the full protection of the Endangered Species Act, you can't go in and whack a wolf.
And so it was decided wolves would be returning to Yellowstone. In 1995, 14 wolves were captured in Canada and relocated to Yellowstone National Park. 17 more joined them in 1996. In the following years, wolves would reproduce, form packs, and reclaim their role as apex predators. By 2005, the Yellowstone wolf population had grown to 115 wolves. In 1996, Yellowstone wolves had killed 47 elk over a 1-month period. But the reintroduction didn't just manage elk, it triggered an ecological cascade. Elk migrated away from the parts of the park where they could be easily hunted by wolves, allowing vegetation to rapidly grow, in some areas quadrupling in just 6 years. Barren land transformed to thriving forests, supporting species that hadn't lived in Yellowstone for decades. But perhaps the most interesting change was the complete transformation of the Yellowstone rivers. Better vegetation and less animals near river banks brought more stable, healthy rivers, which adapted completely new currents and behavior, all because of one extraordinary species. It's important to note that states did not get nearly as much control in the reintroduction as was initially agreed upon.
It's too bad that we didn't turn it back to the states and give them more authority. States know how to do this. They're good wildlife agencies.
The public reaction to the reintroduction was mixed. Some locals perceived wolves as a threat to human safety. This fear drew a reaction born from emotion rather than logic.
The animosity toward wolves. I saw legislators stand up, break into tears, grown men. People stand up and say, if we have wolves back in Yellowstone, there are going to be school kids out waiting for buses. Early in the morning, low twilight, they're going to be attacked by wolves, and their viscerals will be scattered down the highway, the blood and the viscera. I realized then that trying to bring common sense to wolf management had fierce opposition.
However, the greatest cause of opposition towards wolves wasn't born from fear for human safety, but the wolves' effect on ranching. Ranching has been the cornerstone of Wyoming culture and livelihood as long as it's been inhabited. When wolves returned to Yellowstone, many ranchers voiced concerns that they felt were ignored. According to Bob Lucas, Wyoming rancher,
when they did the introduction, why across the state, why we tried to, as proposed, we tried to stop it, and we were totally unsuccessful.
Following the reintroduction, wolves killed livestock on ranches. While the government reimbursed wolf kills, it wasn't always enough to make up for lost revenue. Ranchers had to prove livestock deaths were caused by wolves, and ranchers didn't always know how much livestock they lost. After the reintroduction, wolf populations grew much faster than expected.
But boy, oh boy, those wolves, they got to be so many numbers so quickly. It surprised, I think, everybody.
And I remember asking my biologist, I said, how long is it going to take for these rascals to hit the 10 pack? So in the string, it's going to take 10 or 12 years. Ironically, Yellowstone was so beneficial for wolves and the prey species. They hit the objective in 3 years.
The sudden growth in the wolf population triggered a newly violent reaction to Yellowstone wolves. Before rapid population growth, wolf disputes were mainly dealt with legally in politics, protests, and lawsuits. Some felt the growth of the wolf population solidified wolves as permanent and went against the experimental population compromise initially agreed upon. In the late 1900s, illegal wolf killings rose. In 1997, 5 wolves were killed illegally in the Yellowstone area, shot or run over by cars. The violence against Yellowstone wolves further heightened the debate between wolf supporters and opposers. Oppositionists argued that more legal wolf hunting was needed to prevent violent reactions.
And it would be helpful to be able to hunt more wolves. The Grove Hunt especially is overrun with wolves.
Environmentalists, however, argued that wolves would be safer under the full protection of the Endangered Species Act, rather than as an experimental population. Numerous lawsuits ensued, with one side fighting for increased hunting reforms and the other for more wolf protection. This harsh divide could be partially attributed to the lack of state control in these lawsuits. Federal officials in faraway cities made legal decisions without the local knowledge needed to balance conservation and ranching. In the decades following the wolf reintroduction, Western state governments have created reforms to protect Wyoming ranchers. In 2012, after years of lawsuits, wolves have become delisted as a protected species. As a result, 85% of Wyoming was classified as a predator zone, where trespassing wolves could be killed by ranchers without a license.
This is actually in the predator zone, south of Highway 22. So if I saw one harassing the cattle, I could shoot it.
States also strengthened their depredation policies. In 2024 and 2025, roughly $1 million was awarded to Wyoming ranchers due to livestock depredation. Despite these reforms, ranching in Wyoming continues to struggle. Prior to the wolves being reinstated, Wyoming was dealing with industrialization and shrinking ranchland. The return of the wolves added pressure to an already struggling ranching industry.
50 and 100 years ago, why this was a big ranching community. Most everybody was ranching. The ranches are just barely hanging on right now.
After over a century of conflict, today we are left with a healthy wolf population. Wolves have brought Yellowstone back to life and boosted tourism. Despite this undeniable success, ranchers and Western state governments feel betrayed by their lack of control in a revolution that affected them most. When you look at the politics behind the reintroduction, you get one clear takeaway. The reintroduction would have been much smoother if state governments had more control. The federal government couldn't make good policies because they didn't understand the effects of reintroducing wolves in a place they knew little about amongst a culture they were unfamiliar with. If allowed more control, state governments made up of ranchers, farmers, and local citizens could have managed the reintroduction more thoughtfully than federal officials, decreasing the divide between ranchers and environmentalists.